Now with our mail component ready, we can continue with our register controller. First thing I'm going to check, this send email is actually going to return integer because our send method will do that. The same thing for this send activation email. It's not going to be Boolean, it's going to be an integer, but that's all fine. If we check our previous method, which is this activation, it checks for negativity of this send activation email, which will return integer. If it's 0, this will still evaluate to true, because 0 when converted to a Boolean, it returns false. Okay, so let's go back to our send mail method, and from within the send mail method, what we're going to do is simply return, and then this container, we are going to get instance of the mail component, so make and then mail, and we're going to straight away chain it using add from method, and we're going to add .env, then get, and we have, if we just open our env file, we have business name and email. So email goes first here, so get business email, then comma, and get business name. So this is going to be a sender email and name. Obviously, you can fetch it from a database if you have a system in place which stores this sort of details in a database or anywhere else. We are fetching this directly from this .env, basically from the environment variables, which this .env file obviously when is parsed on when we actually bootstrap in our application, it's obviously setting these variables. Okay, next is going to be add to the recipient is going to be user, and this user's email address, so email property, and then user, its name. Then we're gonna go for set subject, and subject of this message will simply be activate account. Then we're gonna go for set body, and body will be we will get the content of the body from within the internal method again, message body, and we pass user as an argument here, and then we simply call send method on it. So now let's add this message body method, and it takes user instance, so let's type hinted user, and from within this method we're going to start with the URL that we want to send within this email. It's going to be this request, and we get root, which is going to give us our domain name preceded with the protocol and then colon and 2 forward slashes, and then activate, which is going to refer to the activate controller, and then token as query string, which is going to be user, and then token, which we obviously, if we just scroll up, you'll see we've just reset it on this user instance before we pass it through as an argument to the send mail, and then obviously subsequently to this message body. Okay, so that's our URL, and then out variable we're going to start with a paragraph. Please click the link below in order to activate your account, and it's a closing paragraph. And then let's concatenate it, and I'm going to close the file browser on the left with the anchor tag with href, which is going to link to this URL, and then out concatenating this, close the href tag, then target, set it to blank, and let's close the opening anchor tag, then out. URL is going to be displayed in between the opening and closing anchor tag, and then out. Let's close it. So that's our link with the message above, and we can obviously now return this out variable. Okay, so that's our complete message. Let's now add some doc blocks again. Return string, takes user as argument, get message body. Okay, so our register controller is now completed. I'm just going to remove this redundant space here. And in order to test it, if we now save it and close it, make sure that you fill in this section here. You need to obtain some SMTP credentials in order to be able to deliver your email address. Without this, your email distribution will fail, and obviously your registration activation email will not be delivered. Now, before we go and test it, one thing that I've noticed I've forgotten to do is within the register controller post method, if we scroll down, this catch exception statement, rather than just returning new JSON response, should also call method send headers and then get content. Otherwise, it's not gonna work as expected. So if we now save it and close it, we can go back to the browser and fill in our registration form with some data. Then we go, this is the tutorial, some password, hit return, and there we go, it's processing. This should now send an email and gives us a message as expected. If we go back to our mailbox, there we go, our message with the activation link. If we click on this link, obviously we don't have this activate controller yet. That's why we see the dynamic page. Let's go back to our editor and let's create this controller quickly. So under the app controllers, let's create a new one. Let's call it activate controller. And it's under app controllers namespace. It extends our controller, the main controller. And what we're going to do next is start with the public function index, which is the default action that's going to be triggered. Then we're going to go for this activate method, and then we are going to return this view, and the view is going to be pages activate. We obviously don't have this activate method yet. It's going to be a very simple method when, first of all, what we're going to do is obtain the token from the request. So token, and this request get token, which has been sent through as a query string. And then we're going to check if empty token or is null, and then we create the instance of the user. We associate it with a user by token. We pass this token through as an argument, and then we get the first record. And let me just explain in just a second what's happening here again. I'm going to import this app models user. So first of all, we're checking whether the token is found within the query string. If we go back to the browser, you'll see we have this token item here with the token. So now we're trying to identify the record of the user with this token. So if we go back to the editor, so if it's empty, then obviously there's something wrong, or we cannot find the user by this token. If it's null, if this user by token first returns null, we associate in this tray with the variable here. So we have instance in case that fails, and obviously the user has been found. So if that happens, what we're going to do is throw the exception. So throw new exception, just a standard one, invalid request. If we just import this exception as well here, so right here at the top. Okay, and obviously if that fails, that means the user has been found, the token is there, and we simply use this instance of the user and make this user active. So make active method, which we've created in one of the previous videos. And now just before we actually call it, let's just add the doc blocks, but also it's going to return a view. Let's import this class. I'm not bothered with this factory here, just a view. And for the summary, we're going to say display activation page. Then for the activate method, we are going to have throws exception, returns void, because there's nothing being returned from this method, and then activate user. There we go. Okay, so that's our controller, activate controller completed. Before actually we do anything, let's go back to our database, refresh the page, refresh the table, the users table. You can see active is set to null, to 0. Password, then we have this token by which we later on trying to identify the record. If we go back to our browser, you see this is the token which has been obviously associated with this token property here. So now if I refresh this page, there we go, account activated. If I go back to our table, refresh the record, you can see active has been set to 1, the token has been set to null, and the record is now active. So you should be able to log in. If we just go try and log in, so it was as the tutorial was just password, hit return, and there we go. We are redirected to the dashboard. So our registration and login works just fine. Now, one other thing, let's now, I'm going to go back remove this record from the table. So we don't have any records here. Now, if we were trying to log out by clicking this logout button, it will take us to the logout route, obviously, but it will not log us out. That's the only problem. So let's go back to the editor. Let's create a new controller called logout controller. So logout controller. And on this controller, let's just quickly extend controller. And let's add the only method that's going to be within this controller, which is going to be index. So public function index, which is obviously the default action that's triggered when we call the controller. Then this guard, we're going to use a logout. So we log the user out and then return new redirect response. And we're looking for this illuminate HTTP response. We pass the path where we want to redirect the user, which is going to be just a / to the plain domain, and then send method to execute it. And let's just add some doc blocks here. It returns the Symfony component HTTP foundation response. So import this class and log user out and redirect to the login page. Save it. Close it. We can also close this activate controller. If we go back to the browser now, if I refresh the page being on the logout route or just by clicking logout again, you'll see that logged me out and redirected me back to the login screen. So what I want to test now is this option where we're trying to register with the email address that's already within the database, and then obviously we get this link to resend the activation email. Let's try and register again, and if we hit register, that should add the record to the database and send an email again. And if we check our mailbox, there we go, email is here, but I'm going to ignore this first email. Check our database. Refresh the table. There we go. We've got inactive record here. Let's go back and try and register again with the same details. So I'm just going to use the same email, then password. There we go. If I hit register, you see that this tells me this email address is already taken, but it doesn't tell me anything about the activation email. And this is because the register form doesn't have this option. It's only when we actually get to the login screen. If I now try and log in with the same email address and just use password, hit return, and there we go. Your account has not been activated. So a register form will tell us that this email is already taken. So someone say, okay, so I'm going to the login screen now because it's already registered. If you provide the email and password on the inactive account, this will give you this message. So you can click on this resend activation email. If we click on this one, you will see that what will happen in just a second. There we go. We've got this confirmation message. Let's go back to our mailbox, and there we go. We've got 2 emails now. So we have this is the latest one. This 0 minutes ago. There we go. So if we expand it, you can see we have obviously this email with the token. If I click on this one now, I can obviously activate it. So with the login, if you've forgotten to activate it with the registration, you can still get this activation email when you try and log in. And the last thing I want to test is this registration without sending this activation email. So let's go back to the database. Make sure that you've removed all the records or any records that you're going to be using for testing. Then back to the editor, open our .env file, and we are going to change the value associated with this verification variable to false this time. So that means obviously we don't want the activation email to be sent. Just register them, add the record to the database, and log the user straight in. Okay, and I'm again going to fill in this form with the same data. And if we register now, you'll see that's much quicker. We straight away see the dashboard page. If we check our mailbox, there's no email here. We are obviously logged in. If we just go back to the previous page, you can see that if we access register page, we are automatically redirected to the dashboard page because we have this method from within both of the controllers. Login controller, we have this for the constructor, we have this redirect if logged in, and same goes for this register controller, which means obviously if the user is logged in, make sure that they can't access login or registration page. So if we save, register and login, and if we check our database, refresh, you can see active is still set to null, to 0. token is set to null, but now we obviously don't require activation because we strictly set it to false, this verification. That's why our login now doesn't care if the active field has flag set to 1 or 0. Okay, so that's it. In this video, our registration and login are now completed. In the next video, we're going to have a look at the forgot password section.